If you're struggling with loneliness, if you're struggling with grief, one of the most painful griefs that we're going to experience in life is not losing the relationship. It's being very much alive and realizing that you were emotionally available enough to dive into that relationship. But when it took time to grow, the person you loved did not have the capacity to meet you there. And so the relationship can no longer exist. I'm going to invite you into the emotional arena to explore. It is going to be one of my stories. And so if you are personally out there, you know me, yes, this might be a heavier emotional bench press for you today. Okay. If you don't know me, it probably won't be as heavy a bench press for you. And yet, here we are in the emotional arena, and I am going to be sharing one of my stories. I think it is critically important that I am in the emotional arena with you all doing that work, understanding that it is hard work, but it is 100% worth it at the end of the day when you say, yes, I am more emotionally fit. I have greater emotional wealth and I am more emotionally secure. I want that for you. And so, as we dive into the emotional arena today, grab a journal because we're going to be talking about the kind of grief that doesn't break you. It might shatter you in the moment. Do not get me wrong. It might shatter you in the moment. But in the end, it does not break you. And the reality is that even if it did shatter you and bring you back together, if that's the image we're going to have for this, right? That in the end, this story that I'm going to share with you is the perfect example of how to help you understand the difference between someone who is emotionally vulnerable and someone who is emotionally available. We're even going to have a piece where I show you the emotional unavailable bit. And so, without further ado, again, go grab that journal. We're going to go ahead and dive in here. One of the pieces that I want you to take with you, because this is a series right now on emotional security, we're in episode 5 of the series, Emotional Vulnerability. I want you to remember this equation. So let's go ahead and write this down or click save in your beautiful brains. Emotional fitness plus emotional wealth is what equals emotional security. And this is a pretty critical equation because the first 3 profiles are all about building your emotional fitness. It's your relationship with yourself and your ability to regulate even in the face of discomfort. Yes? Emotional wealth is the next 3 profiles. Emotional wealth is what you build when you intentionally invest in relationships with others so that you can get a particular return on that investment. When you have emotional fitness and emotional wealth over time, that is what builds your genuine emotional security. When you genuinely feel confident and secure at your core, and that is what ripples out to others and the world at large. Yeah? We're not doing performative security here where you're like, oh, I look really good and everything's really good on the outside and I'm making money and I've got homes and I've got cars and I don't care. I mean, it's really nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure you worked really hard for all those things, but we're here to level up emotionally. Yes. And the reality is you cannot build emotional security internally by simply accruing things outside. There is no amount of money and no amount of merit that is going to help you feel emotionally secure at the end of the day. And so, now that you have that equation, I hope you've clicked save on it. We're in the emotional wealth category. And last episode was about emotional availability. This episode really focuses on emotional vulnerability. That's the next level up, okay? For most of my clients, my goal is to get you to be emotionally available. It is a rare few that are going to continue to go on and say, I want to be not only available, Nina, I want to be vulnerable and I want to be genuinely secure. My hat is off to you. I salute you. Yes. I'm going to give you a brief reminder for those of you who already listened in, for those of you who are new, on what emotional availability is, okay? An emotionally available individual is now available to themselves. They have an awareness of themselves. They are willing to see what their patterns are. They understand what the difference is between what they're feeling and what somebody else's stuff is. Yes? That is an emotionally available individual. The biggest thing about an emotionally available person is that you recognize it's a choice. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. You recognize it's a choice. You choose to be emotionally available. You choose to show up for yourself in the emotional arena. That is the emotionally available individual at their core. All right. So if you're leading there and you're like, that's where I am, then I'm really doing that work to show up for myself. Beautiful. I love it. Okay. And for those of you who are leaning into your edge and you say, no, I can level up a little bit more. I've got greater capacity, Nina. I know there's something more. There is emotional vulnerability. With emotional vulnerability, you're saying, you know what? I own my emotions. I show up as myself. And you know what? I will courageously share how I'm feeling with someone else in order to go deeper with them. I want to hold that space. I want to have deeper relationships and I want to grow in relationship with someone else. I am emotionally vulnerable. Now I'm going to play this back, the difference between emotional availability and emotional vulnerability. The emotionally available person at their core says, I can be available to myself. I can be honest with myself. I can share how I feel. It doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to be emotionally vulnerable and go deeper with you. They might be able to tell you how they feel. They might be able to be honest with themselves and not tell you how they feel. But they're being honest with themselves, and that's the stop. Where we start to go into vulnerability is when we share with the intention to go deeper. It's that intention to go deeper in relationship and be vulnerable in that way that really marks the difference between emotional availability and emotional vulnerability. So if at this point you're like, oh my gosh, Nina, I really want to know where I am on the spectrum, we have a quiz. It will be in the show notes. It's free. It's easy. It'll take about 5 minutes of your time, okay? I invite you to go into the show notes, click that, figure out where you are on the emotional security spectrum, okay? It will give you the next 3 steps for what you're supposed to do. I love this quiz. Please go take it. It will be such a burden lifted off of you when you understand where you are on that spectrum, okay? So, without further ado, I've reminded you of the emotional security equation. That is one of your first golden nuggets. Take it, run with it. Emotional fitness plus emotional wealth is what equals emotional security. 2, I've reminded you what emotional availability is. At its core, a person who's available to themselves so they can be honest with themselves and thus be honest with you. Okay? Now they might choose to share or they might not choose to share, but they're going to be honest. All right? The emotionally vulnerable person, this is point number 3, golden point number 3, is able to share with you with the intention to go deeper. They want to build emotional wealth. They want a deeper relationship with you, okay? These are your top 3 points as we lean into this story, which again could be an emotionally bench press that's a bit heavier. And that is why we're here. I'm inviting you into the arena with me because the reality is, even as I tell this story and as you listen to the story as a witness to the story, I promise you the ceiling is not going to fall in. The ground is not going to cave out from beneath us. We're going to be okay. And if we do it right, if we lean into our edge and we show up and we let ourselves feel what we're genuinely feeling in the moment, whatever that is, no judgment. But if we let ourselves feel, you are emotionally bench pressing. You are letting yourself feel the feelings in a way that allows you to become stronger, more resilient, and more emotionally responsive, which is what we want, right? In an emotionally secure world, you can be responsive to whatever's popping up for you, okay? You're going to feel more secure, more agency. I definitely want this for you. And I also want it for me. So, how about I tell you a story? A story that reminds us of the fact that you cannot control the rain, but you can build courage to weather the storm. And the storm always comes, it is inevitable. So, I, once upon a time, was head over heels in love with a human being who was very different from me. And for the sake of this story, we're going to call this human being Forrest. And uh, as with all of our stories, and I invite you to think about any time you hear a story about someone else, you're really only hearing about a facet of that person's life, right? From my perspective in this case. We don't have the real person here. We don't have the multifaceted lenses that they exist with. What you have is my version through my lived experience, right? I'm going to share with you how I felt and I'm going to stay focused on how I experience things. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the characters in the story. You might be me in the story. You might identify more as Forrest in the story. Heck, there might be some other character that pops up that you feel like, whatever the case, I just want you to keep being honest with yourself as I embody what it is to be emotionally vulnerable with you here today. Okay. All right. So once upon a time, I was in love with this gentleman. And when I say we were different, we were very different. Okay. Now, most of my partners have been mostly like me. But on the surface, when you looked at me and Forrest, right, I was more free, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more open. Forrest was more conservative, sometimes could be a bit rigid in his approach. Yes, I was a city girl. He was a country boy. I was not gun toting, did not grow up with guns. He did grow up with guns. Very responsible gun owner, just so we're clear on that point. What I'm trying to define for you here is that we were two human beings who were very different at the surface, but at our core shared so many values, shared similar values around how we wanted to raise our children, what type of family life we should have, how co-parenting should exist, what family time should look like, what intimate time should look like. But where we had differences, the sparks flew. All right. The sparks flew. And so, as you put yourself into this story, right? Two people who have differences, I want to invite you to imagine that you, as your own person, have your own island, okay? Your island is your responsibility. The things that happen on your island are your responsibility. And everyone has their own island in this case. In this story, I have my own island, Forrest has his own island. And what was customary to us was customary on our islands, okay? But when we had conflict, that is where one island was saying, I don't want to respect the differences on your island. Well, I don't want to respect the differences on your island, and thus you have conflict, okay? So if we can recognize this, that conflict occurs between individuals because of differences in what is customary to you, then we can say, huh, if I can learn how to respect these differences, if I can be emotionally vulnerable enough to share about these differences and go a little deeper with this person, can we continue to grow and build something that may even be stronger than what we had before? Emotional vulnerability and emotional security can allow for this. Heck, emotional availability is just the willingness to maybe build a bridge here to say, hey, I see this. Do you see this? Yes. It's when you don't have these pieces that the bridge begins to cave, that connection breaks down, communication breaks down, disrespect enters the picture. And now, before you know it, we've got one island fighting another island, even though there's love. And so there was so much love between Forrest and I, despite our differences. And when it came down to it and recognizing that this relationship was either going to make it or it was going to break, I sat there, metaphorically speaking, and I said very directly to Forrest, I love you. What are we doing? I don't want to hide how I feel. And that's how I feel we are in this moment. I want us to grow. I want us to build. I wanted us to have an emotionally vulnerable and secure relationship. But in order to do that, I needed us to level up together. So here I was saying what I needed, my truth that's emotionally available. Here I was saying, I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to learn how to understand where you're coming from so we have less conflict. That's emotional vulnerability. I want to go a little deeper. I want to learn about my patterns and how I can show up differently to help you feel more secure. Again, emotional vulnerability, a little deeper. And certainly some emotional security in which I'm saying it. And I don't want you to have to change. And I don't want to have to change, but what I would love it is if we could learn how to grow together and respect our differences. Yeah. So this is me coming from an emotionally secure approach. And of course, the grief that we're talking about in this episode is we know Forrest is not going to be there with me. It's no surprise. Forrest is not going to be there with me. But I am going to share with you the words that Forrest shared with me so that you can truly understand what emotional availability looks like. This is a beautifully written text that I received. And I really want you to hear and let it land what is saying. And we've got to come from this space, from this courageous space of healing in which we believe what this person is saying, right? We're not going to say, oh, this person is secretly narcissistic or manipulative, or no, that's not the kind of person we're talking about in today's episode. Okay. We're going to take all that. We're going to put that on the shelf over there. Today's message comes from a real human being with goodness in their heart. And this is the emotionally available part of the message. I'm going to read it to you word for word. Remember, I brought up that I didn't want to hide. And so Forrest responds, I don't want to hide how I feel. I love you. I love spending time with you. I love the days we have together and love spending time with the kids. I'm physically and emotionally attracted to you. But I also don't want to hide the parts that make us not work in the long run as a couple either. That last line is the one to be really curious about, right? The first few lines are all aligned, right? They're all aligned with each other. There's green flag after green flag after green flag in this relationship. And this is Forrest being really honest here when he says at the end, but I also don't want to hide the parts that make us not work in the long run as a couple either. Now, this is where we get curious because as an emotionally available individual, we share the truth, but only emotional vulnerable people want to go a little deeper and get a little bit more curious if they want to invest in that relationship and build something and grow. This last line, of course, because I'm emotionally vulnerable in this moment in this story, I get curious on it and I say, Forrest, I got to know. When you say you don't want to hide the parts that make us not work in the long run as a couple, I'm not a fortune teller. You're not a fortune teller. We don't know what's not going to work in the long run, but you feel like something must not be working right now. What is it? Now, I want to be really clear up until this point for the character that we have today of Forrest. We've got an emotionally available sharing, right? And an honest, and I don't want to hide these things, right? There it is. So I asked this question of Forrest, and the response that I got was, well, Nina, you vacation with men. Put a pin in that because we're going to come back to it, folks. You vacation with men, and you've got a bunch of guy friends. Now, maybe you can hear it. Do we hear the piece of this that is not about how Forrest feels? It's a projection on me. And I think that this is so important that we do speak about this and we call this in right here because I am inviting you in the emotional arena to always own what is yours. Don't cast on other people your discomforts and your insecurities and the things that you're worried about. Own it. Own what is yours because it's going to give you greater agency and greater security. And so in this moment, what we went from is emotionally available individual with emotionally vulnerable individual to seeing this story cast on me of I vacation with men and I have guy friends. Let me add a little context to this because I had to ask, vacation with men and guy friends, what are you talking about? Vacation with men is because I work with men and I design healing adventures for men. So let me be really clear. I don't vacation randomly with men, folks. In reality, I was working with men and this was uncomfortable for Forrest. If he had been able to own this, instead of casting it on me, what he would have said was, I don't know how to reconcile the fact that you prioritize working with men and have a romantic relationship with me. I am getting confused the personal and professional worlds that you live in. And if Forrest had been available and vulnerable, he would have been able to say, and I would like for us to figure that out because I don't want to feel that way. Do you hear how we went from emotionally unavailable, you vacation with men and have lots of guy friends, to the emotionally available and vulnerable statement that said, I don't know how to find comfort in this, but I want to. Can we talk about it? That is a shining, very real, very painful example of an emotionally unavailable, available, and vulnerable moment, and how we can see it a little bit differently. The other bit on having friends, it goes in the same category, right? I grew up with guy friends. I do have guy friends, yes. Shout out to Alex, like the band, comedian, who just had a baby, by the way. Congrats, yes, and is married. And one of my other great guy friends, 15 years we've been friends since undergrad, right? No romantic life there, right? Nick Freejay, musician. Ladies, he's very single, okay? But I bring it back to this moment in which I sat there as an emotionally vulnerable individual, wanting to go deeper, wanting to build with this beautifully available in this moment man who then switched into emotional unavailability. And the reality at the end of the day is, do I believe that we had love? Absolutely. Do I believe that he loved me? Absolutely. Do I believe that I loved him? 100%. Did we have the same capacity for one another's love? Did we have the same capacity for one another's existence and the differences in our existence? The answer is no. The answer is no. And if you're out there saying, fuck, oh my gosh, that's me. I hear you. My heart is with you. It is hard when you're on either part of the spectrum. Imagine being these two people in love. But because one of you has greater capacity and one of you does not know how to have greater capacity, you can no longer be together. That is heartbreaking. It is one of the biggest reasons why I do the work that I do, to help people gain greater emotional capacity so that you can have more. I want you to have more, but the reality is, if we don't do the work to build emotional capacity, you will continue to be limited to the life and the depth of relationship which you have always had. If you keep doing what you have always done, you will keep getting what you have always gotten. I don't want that for you here. I do. I have an empowerment bias. I want more for you. Yes. And so, because the reality was no here, because there were insecurities on Forrest's part that I could not help him with, I could not change without literally cutting out people from my life and stopping work, right? Because I could not change to help him be more comfortable. This relationship had to end. But the grief that I felt in losing this relationship, not because there wasn't love, not because we weren't compatible, right? Because we didn't have capacity in the present that matched up with one another, the grief that I felt at this was immense. Grief comes in waves. And for those of you out there who are saying, man, Nina, I've got the breakup. I was the Forrest, or I was the Nina, right? Regardless of gender, people throw gender to the side. Who were you? I want to invite you to step into the story. Who were you, or are you in this story? As we talk about leveling up in your emotional arena, whether you're emotionally unavailable, emotionally available, or emotionally vulnerable, wanting to go deeper, do you have the capacity to maintain the type of relationship that you truly wish for? And if you don't, are you doing the work to level up and build the capacity to have the relationship that you truly desire? And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it, deserve. So many of us have healing work to do. And so we can't show up with somebody else yet because we don't have the capacity yet to do that. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's no shame in that. Let's just be honest about it. From my heart to your heart, let's be honest. Do you have the level of relationships in your life that you want? Or are you sometimes lonely? Do you have the beautiful wealth of relationships that you want? Or are you sometimes isolating yourself? Do you have the emotional wealth and security that you want? Or do you find that no matter how much money or accomplishment you have, it never feels like enough because at the end of the day, you don't feel connected in the way that you truly want to be? I know that these are hard questions, and I am definitely inviting you to emotionally bench press here because I want you to level up in your arena. I started this episode with, one of the most painful griefs that you have isn't necessarily losing the relationship, it's the reality that it wasn't because of love or compatibility, it was from lack of capacity. And here's my gift to you. If you can choose emotional availability, capacity can be built. It's not something that you get from your family. It's not something that the universe just magically trickles upon you. You build it through experiences, through opportunities to experience, through engaging in life in a new way, in a very intentional way. And so I hope that you have taken something from this episode, and I hope that you have put yourself in the shoes of one or both of the characters here, because between this episode and the next week's episode on emotional security, folks, I really want you to take action in your life. I don't just want you to think about it, and I don't just want you to feel your way through it. That is enough if that's where you are. But if you have capacity for more, I want you to take action. I want you to take action in your life to show up a little bit differently. For those of you who are saying, I want to know what the next 3 steps are, go into the show notes, take the emotional security quiz, find out what your emotional security type is. Figure out if you're in the emotional fitness part of the equation, emotional wealth part of the equation, or if you're like, hey, I'm emotionally secure. I can tell you right now, y'all, it's a process. It's a process. And the reality is, you're not always going to be emotionally secure. You're not always going to be emotionally vulnerable or emotionally available. You are going to shift and fluctuate because you are a human. And this is part of the beauty of humanity, but also part of the difficulty of it too. Take a minute right now and note down, what is it that you're taking from this episode? What one thing are you taking and you're going to take action in your life between this week and next week to make a change, to be a little bit more emotionally available or emotionally vulnerable or emotionally secure? What are you doing to level up in your emotional arena? With that said, I've given you your adventure challenge between this week and next week to take the quiz. I've given you so many good nuggets of knowledge. I invite you to lean into your edge and explore just one that can help you take action between this episode and next. And that essentially is what I brought into the arena today, folks. Thank you so much for being here with me and taking the time to level up in life, love, and leadership. Yeah. Until next time, talk to you soon. Bye for now.